This episode is brought to you by BigMooseCoffeeCompany.co. Pal, we are on episode... Help me out here. Six. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you win. And we've got a great guest today. He was really, really good to talk to. And for people that aren't so much a fan of hearing me and Kris waffle on, they'll be happy with this episode because this guy was happy to chat about what he'd done.
Yeah, and I could have listened to him all day.
All day, happily.
I feel like out of all the guests we've had, I feel like he's the one I want to take for a beer the most.
Yeah, I feel like he's got some stories.
It made me feel warm and fuzzy, this episode, actually. Like, I've always been proud of... I say this like I'm part of it. I'm not, but I've always been proud that British fell running is as good as it is. As a fanboy, I can look at it, and it just showcases it. This episode, I think Paul's a great... whether he considers himself in it or not, he seems that humble, but he's definitely part of it and leading the way and a great role model for it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, obviously, as the title of this podcast suggests, we're about to talk to the fantastical Paul Tierney. Paul, well, thank you for appearing on the podcast. How are we doing?
Thanks very much for having me. I'm good. I'm a bit tired still, but pretty good, all things considered.
You say you're a bit tired still. When exactly did you finish?
I finished on the 20th of June, so it's a little over 3 weeks ago, I think, isn't it? Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, well, I guess 300 odd miles will do that to you.
Yeah, so that's the longest thing I've ever done. So it's not like I didn't expect to be tired. So yeah, I'm fine with being tired, but it's just made things like work and stuff be a little bit more difficult to get through it. And yeah, no, I'm not complaining or anything like that. This is what I signed up for, so it's fine.
Well, yeah, fair enough. I think you're allowed to complain if your legs are a bit sore, but yeah. We've kind of leapt in here for the uninitiated. What have you just done?
So I live in the Lake District, and I generally my sport, I suppose, is fell running and trail running and long distance type stuff like that. So up here, about 5 years ago, Steve Birkinshaw joined up all the Wainwright fells, which are 214 hills in the Lake District, and he tried to do them as fast as possible. And I've just in the last 3 weeks done the same challenge as Steve. So it took just over 6 days. It was 6 days, 6 hours, 5 minutes. So that's why I'm complaining.
Yeah, understandable.
Yeah. I think if anyone's going to complain about anything, I think that is a justified reason. But that's not so. This isn't. I suppose it's a lot of like the challenges in the fell running world, especially in the lakes. It's kind of the Bob Graham and all the things around there. It's someone does it first and then lays down the gauntlet for the rest. Was Steve the first to do it, you say?
No. So in 1981. Chris Bland, who was from Borrowdale, he came along and decided he would try to do all the Wainwrights, but in a different format. So the Wainwrights are the Wainwrights because a guy called Arthur Wainwright came along and wrote a series of guidebooks to his favourite fells in the Lake District, and that's why they've become known as the Wainwrights. So Chris Bland decided to try and complete all the Wainwrights, but to do a book every day. So it wasn't the most logical way to join them up because he had to do them as they were laid out in the book. So it wasn't as quick a way of doing it, and he didn't quite manage to do them all, but he did quite a lot of them over the course of the 7 days. So seven of these guidebooks. So he was the first to try it in 1981, and then in 85 or 6, Alan Heaton came along and he did 9 days, I think it took him to do all the Wainwrights. He, instead of doing it book by book, he just joined them up in the most logical way he could think of doing them. I think he got an infection in his foot or something like that during it, and he spent half a day in a hospital or something like that as well. So that slowed him down a little bit. And then the following year, Joss Naylor, who people tend to know about in the fell running scene, he's a bit of a legend. He did it the following year, and he did 7 days, 1 hour. And I think that was 1986. And it wasn't done then for another 28 years. So it was Steve Birkinshaw then who came along, like I say, in 2014. And he sort of looked at Joss's route, and he totally rejigged it and came up with what he felt was a more logical route and a quicker route. So he maybe took about 10 miles off the total distance and maybe like 1,000 or 2,000 meters of ascent or something like that. And managed to do it in 6 days, 13 hours. So that was the new record then. And it was a big deal, I think, because it hadn't been done for 28 years. And it took so much out of Steve. Like, there was a film made about it. He's written a book about it. And it was very inspiring to see him suffer how he did and still manage to break this record. And so since then, no one had tried it. And I guess that there was a bit of interest then, because people were waiting to see, would someone else give it a go, and maybe they were waiting to see someone fall flat on their face as well. I don't know, but it was that's the history of it, and that's why I suppose was inspired to try it as well.
You were inspired by Steve Birkinshaw's suffering?
No, well,
another man's pain is another man's pleasure. Wow. And all that.
That's what I heard.
No, I didn't like seeing Steve suffer, obviously, but I didn't know Steve at the time he did it. I moved here for a year in 2013 to the Lake District. I went back home for about 10 months then in 2014, and then I moved back at the end of 2014. I've been here since, so I didn't know Steve when he did it, and obviously I knew of him and looked up to him for the stuff he'd done. He'd won the Dragon's Back, and he's won numerous mountain marathons, and just a hard, tough, resilient guy who is very, very good at these kind of horrible, hard, difficult challenges, and really, really good navigator, and just someone who, if you were to pick someone back then in 2014 who could potentially do it, then he would have been the guy you'd pick. And so that was what was inspiring about it, that he was just this guy who was just tough and resilient, and you knew if he tried it that there was a fair chance he was going to do it, and that's what I liked about him. So I didn't like seeing him suffer, because, like, if you've seen the film, he really does suffer badly with his feet, and just his face just looks so, the lack of sleep, you can just see it in his face. His face is all puffed up, and he can barely open his eyes, and he's just totally knackered by the end of it. But he managed it, and it was great to watch at the time.
And something within that, when you're looking at that man sleep deprived through pain and puffy eyes, there's some part of your brain, Paul, that goes, yeah, I fancy that.
yeah. Because I think when you look at because there's loads of different challenges and races that are similar in terms of distance and difficulty and all that stuff, and one of the things that attracts people to them, I guess, is the uncertainty of whether they will actually be able to finish something like that. So there's no guarantee when you start that race or challenge or whatever it is. There's no guarantee that you're actually going to finish it. So it's like at the edge of what you might be capable of, and I think that's one of the attractions. Testing yourself against something like that, and that's different to, say, even 100-mile race. Like, you might not get to the end of a 100-mile race, but once you've done one or two, as long as you can manage your mind, you'll probably get through races like that, and anything shorter than that as well. But this is, I don't know, it feels like there's so much more uncertainty, that your body could just physically not be able to keep moving, you get an injury or whatever, and there's so many other factors that come into play. So it's just a way of testing yourself, I suppose, against a challenge like that.
Well, and that's obviously something that appealed to you, was going out there and taking on a challenge that was possibly bigger than you could bite off.
Go on. Yeah, because I didn't have. I mean, I have done some other long stuff. So, like, I've done a race in the Italian Alps, the Tour de Géant, a couple of times, and so before I'd done that, I didn't really have any reference. To a point of reference to kind of say to myself, I think I could do the Wainwrights, because the longest thing I'd done was a 100-mile race. So it's such a vast gap. This was about 320 miles, and the weather was a bigger factor, and the amount of climbing in it. So I didn't have, before I'd done Tour de Géant, I didn't have any point of reference to say, I could possibly do the Wainwrights. Whereas once I had done Tour de Géant a couple of times, that allowed me to at least believe I could attempt the Wainwrights. I still didn't know if I could actually get round it all and do a good time, but the way you can be totally unaware of your own ability, or maybe back yourself a bit too much sometimes, and you can think, I could have a go at that, and you're just nowhere near good enough to do it. Well, that would have been me in 2015. I had probably no chance of doing it, because I needed the experience of doing something in between the two, in between 100 miles and the Wainwrights. And once I had that, then I suppose it just gives you belief. And belief is one of the most important things, because it's a mental challenge as much as a physical one, or more so.
And I think when you're using Tour de Géant as a training event, essentially, it wasn't a training event at the time, but that kind of puts into perspective how big this thing is, because the TDG has probably got a reputation in for people that know a bit about ultra running. They'll probably have heard of the UTMB and all those kind of things and think that's mad. Anyone that knows more about ultra running that's done the UTMB, well, the next thing is like TDG and all those kind of things. This is above that, so it's one of those things. I think we spoke about it right back in the first episode, where it just blows your mind of like, actually humans can do this.
Yeah.
And I suppose you went through that journey yourself, not knowing at the time of doing the Tour de Géant, but then you just have this thing of like, oh my God, this is out there and someone's done that, and if they can do it, maybe I can, and then that whole journey starts. But one of the things I love about fell running is that, and it was a classic example there with Paul, is that it's such a tight community. And this is what I was trying to explain to Adam when he was over from the US, of the difference between that and maybe some more popular trail running in the US, is that there's such a heritage behind those fells. Like, Paul, you could list off not only who's done these things and go back, but you could name year and how they did and who they were. And that's what I absolutely love about it, because it just shows a respect between everyone that's attempting this. Did you have any, obviously a lot of those record attempts were quite a long time ago, but I guess you had help from past competitors as well?
Just say that last bit again. I just
did you have any help from past competitors as you took this on? Yeah,
so I had Steve himself, who he did leg one with me, so he set me off basically, and we did the first 5 hours together, and that was brilliant, because first of all, it meant that particular first section I didn't have to recce, because I could just trust Steve to get me around, and we joked a little bit like he might just send me astray early on and eat up a couple of hours, but no, there was no need to worry about that. He was really good, and he was extremely kind with his advice and his help beforehand, and like there was no way I could have even attempted it without his help, but also without him having done it himself. He laid down a really good route that someone could come along and do afterwards, knowing that it was possible to do, because I had seen him do it, and so it allowed me to even have a go, whereas Joss's attempt was like 28 years before that, and I don't I mean, I'm sure that I have the list of summits that he did, but there's no, like GPS track that I could then head out and start recceing myself. It was just, well, join the hills up yourself in this order, and which would have made it slightly more difficult. And so Steve was obviously the most recent person to complete it, and he was there. Joss Naylor himself came out to Wasdale, which was on the second day, passed through Wasdale. I've never met him properly before that, and he just shook my hand and wished me well, and he was there again on the steps at the finish. So, I mean, that was brilliant to have.
That's fantastic
to have him. Yeah, like I think he's 82 or 3 years of age now, and he's still fitting well, and it was just nice to meet him and for him to, I obviously still don't see myself in his league, and I'm not, you can look at the times he used to run for different like the classic fell races like Wasdale and whatever, and I won't get close to his times. But this challenge isn't about the necessarily the fastest runner or the fittest guy. There's other factors that come into play. So I know I'm not in the league he was in, but it's still nice for him to say nice things about what I'd done, and I never dreamt that would be happening to me ever in my life, and it's probably never going to happen again, so I need to milk it while the going's good. But
it shows that people think that, and people know that the event or the achievement itself is bigger than any ego, and that's another great thing about the fell running, I don't want to call it an industry, fell running family scene, I suppose, is that they have above anything else an appreciation for the challenge itself over anything, and that's why, rightly so, they should be protective of the records.
I think it's something that's said about fell running a lot, and it's true. If you're regularly attending fell races and running in these races and helping out in your local club and whatever, then everyone knows everyone, or they know of everyone, because it is quite a tight-knit community, and that's further afield as well. It's not just the lakes. Like, obviously you've got Yorkshire Dales, the Pennines, up in Scotland, Wales, all these different places with big hills to run on. They've it's the same guys travelling to all these big races, and even smaller races. During the summer on a Wednesday night, you'll have guys who might be up in the lakes on holidays, and they're regulars at the weekends at other races, but they make fell running is central part of their lives, so they'll fit in a race here and there, and it's people are willing almost all the time to get out and help someone who's doing something like this. So whether it's the Bob Graham or the Paddy Buckley or the Ramsey or Joss Naylor Challenge or this thing, you'll always get help if you plan and you ask in time, and there'll always be someone willing to help. And it's because the people who are helping know that they'll be looking for help at some point as well. And it's just about, it's not all take, there's a bit of give as well. And it's a good thing to be involved in. I'm not from this country originally. I lived in Ireland most of my life until about 5 years ago, and I feel like I've been totally welcome here. It's not like this closed insular thing where if you're not from around here, then you kind of are looked down upon. Like, it's the complete opposite to that, if anything, and that's a really nice thing about it as well.
Fantastic. If that doesn't want to make you run 300 and odd miles.
Yeah.
So how much climb in total was there?
So Steve had it at about 36,000 meters. Now I've put the GPS track up on Strava, but Strava doesn't. James Thurlow would be from Open Tracking would be better able to explain. But basically, the elevation profile on that Strava thingy is a bit off. So it's about 8,000 or 9,000 meters short. So
well, we'll take your word for that, Paul.
It's just an Everest. It's just an Everest short.
Yeah.
What we're talking there, and the scale of this. I don't want to get away from the scale of this. 6 days, 6 hours, 320 miles, or 314, I think it was written up as, but you'll know better than me. 4 Everests. That's basically what it works out as.
Yeah, I think because I don't really like that comparison with like 4 times Everest, because to me Everest is it's really bloody dangerous, and it's at this massive elevation with no oxygen up there or anything. Like it's not really I don't think it describes it fairly, because Everest is Everest, and this is just like a lot of climbing. But
I think it's
a better
it's just for scale.
Yeah, I know, of course. Yeah, but a better an easier way to imagine it, I think, is it's just about 5 Bob Grahams in just over 6 days. So it's almost the same elevation and the same distance as about 5 BGs. So
where's the end of this? Because reps of Bob Graham. Now you Bob Graham. Well, or now you could double Bob Graham. Now you can quintuple Bob Graham.
It's just relentless. Like, it's hard to imagine.
But it's less boring than doing 5 Bob Grahams.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there is that.
The Strava map, if you haven't seen it yet, guys, I recommend, even though some of the elevation figures may be wrong, just have a look at it on a map to see what the area covered looks like, because it looks good. It almost looks like you've drawn a flower. With the kind of running route, but then
it's
when
got
you
a
zoom
Rorschach
out,
test kind of thing.
Yeah, when you zoom out, you go, blimey, no, that's a long way as well. It's just incredible, and like from the top end of, I mean, we class ourselves as amateur, endurance fanboys, really, amateur runners, endurance fanboys. Even to us, that's insane. So we have a massive amount of respect for a Bob Graham runner, a double Bob Graham runner, and this is just next level. But I suppose that you said about it's a bit of a give and take with the fell running community, and obviously before someone does a Bob Graham, they often will crew for someone else. I guess you didn't really have that. You had the video of Steve that you saw, but you couldn't really crew for someone else on this, could you? So how did you kind of bridge that gap? Did you end up going out? Obviously you live in the lake, so you can explore these hills, but I can imagine a lot of those hills are quite far away from where you live, and you can't really rely on memory alone to pick the best routes. How did you kind of bridge that gap to make sure that you were on the right track pretty much the whole time? So first of all, I planned and recce'd more for this than I had done for any other thing I'd ever done. So that involved, right from the start in January when I committed to doing it, basically starting to look over the maps, looking at the different legs, and crossing them off one by one. So actually getting out and getting on the ground and recceing them, map and compass out, just going over the actual terrain you were going to be on during the challenge itself. So I had a good friend of mine, Neil McKenzie, who runs with Ambleside as well. He works overseas for about like 4 weeks on, 4 weeks off kind of thing. So when he was home, he was like, he had loads of time to just come out and recce with me, and he was really, really keen, probably more keen than me on the whole thing. So I had loads of help from him as well. So we kind of shared the navigation, and while I wasn't memorizing the route, it was still kind of a comforting thing to know that I had been over the actual terrain that I was going to have to do in the challenge. And I probably did about 2/3 of the route in the order that it was meant to be done. So joining up the fells as they were going to be joined up in the challenge. And then I probably knew another good chunk of the route just from being on the fells myself before that. And then there was a few patches that I didn't know at all, and I didn't even try and recce because I just ran out of time, and I knew I had really good people to help me with the navigation to actually navigate for me when I was doing the challenge. So I live in Windermere, which is like southeast, I guess, or south lakes, over in the Western Fells. I don't go over there very often because it's a bit of a drive round to get there, and I had guys from those areas who knew the fells like the back of their hands. Like, map never even needed to come out. They just knew where they were all the time, and just trusted them, and they were brilliant, and they've got loads of experience themselves of navving for different challenges and BGs and whatever else. So I never had to really worry about
about bits I hadn't reckoned myself. And it like that was, you know, one of the things when you're doing something like this that you need to make sure you do is obviously to prepare as from a mental point of view. You know then going in that you've given yourself every chance, and one of the important things to do was to find the right people and enough people to do this whole thing with me, and that's what I did. So I must have had like 60 or 70 support runners over the course of the week, and other people who turned up to you know, give a bit of support and do a little section with me as well. And once I started running, I never had to worry about where I was going or anything like that. It was I sometimes chimed in and said, "Oh, take this line here" or whatever, but it was rare. Like I didn't have to worry about it, and that's testament to the kind of people we're talking about in the fell running community. So
yeah, it's a fantastically supportive community to have around you. And now there must have been a lot more planning as well in terms of we've just finished an episode, in fact, with a nutritionist. But what are you gorging on your way around like this? Because you did all the cooking on the fly, right?
Yeah. So in terms of my preparation from a nutritional point of view, like I spoke to a girl called Rebecca Dent, who's quite well known in those circles, and she's a dietitian and sports nutritionist who currently lives in Chamonix, but she's from this country, and she did a talk for Ambleside for our fell running club back in, I think it was April, and I had heard of her anyway because there's a bunch of guys in the States who I look up to as coaches, and they recommend her as their go-to person for nutritionist advice. So I had heard of her anyway, and then she did this talk, and I thought immediately I just liked her. She was you know, her attitude and the way she spoke to people. It was just, there was no "you should do this and that's the only bloody way to do it," and like it wasn't like that. It was like because if, I don't know, you'll have come across it yourselves, like sometimes people can get a bit dogmatic about nutrition, and like it's like religion, isn't it? Like it's just it can get a bit that way, but that wasn't the way with her. And I thought she was just really, she obviously knew what she was talking about, and so I spoke to her, and she helped me with the nutrition side of things. But in terms of what I ate, like it was very different, I suppose, every day. Like I knew going into this that what I thought I would want was probably not what I actually would want when I got tired and I got a bit sick, and you know, your stomach just, it can get a bit I suppose fatigued or knackered from eating certain things, and sometimes you'll just crave something you didn't expect to crave, and then that meant having to send someone to the shop or to like a takeaway to get chips or something, like and so it like the main thing I probably wasn't doing before I spoke to Rebecca was eating enough protein in my daily diet, and that was one thing I improved a little bit, and then like for the challenge itself, I was eating while I was moving. It was like sweeter things, like you know, flapjack bars, or maybe occasionally some sort of a chocolate bar like a Mars bar, Snickers or something like that. But then it was better kind of real food at the leg changeovers, so like a proper meal. So maybe you know, some type of sandwich or pasta with chorizo, or I had someone baked a bloody sweet potato at some point. I don't know who baked it, but they delivered this sweet potaw with a load of chili on it, and that was like that was really a big
the best sweet potato you ever
pick
had.
me up. yeah. Like,
this is killing me.
You know, stuff like that can really lift your spirits if you're in the mood for it, obviously. And if you're not, then it can piss you off. But I just it was so varied that I don't know where to start with it. Like for the last 3 or 4 days, I seem to be craving just chips, like just chips with some tomato sauce and salt, and it was just strange. Like I didn't even think about eating chips for the first 3 days, and then for some reason it just became this thing I needed or wanted, and I survived on them for a fair bit of the second half.
There's a large quantity of food as well. I guess it was just such a large quantity of food over the 6 days. It's probably going to take some adjustment to come back off that. I don't know. What's your appetite like now? Are you still feeling like your body's craving it, or are you like, no, I'm done with food for a while?
No, it's sort of back to normal, I guess. Like I'm not. I like to. Me and Sarah, my other half, I like to tell her that I'm the fattest or the heaviest fell runner around here, so that's why I can't go uphill as fast. I like to make excuses for myself, and but I'm about 14 stone or 90 kgs, and like that is quite heavy for someone who wants to run uphill quickly, and so I think I probably eat. Naturally would probably eat a little more than someone who's 70 kgs, you know what I mean? Like they're feeding less of a body or whatever. So I did eat a lot, yeah. And there was times when like I remember eating a foot-long Cumberland sausage in a bun with a load of applesauce and onions. I don't know where the hell that came from either, but I ate the whole thing, a full portion of chips, some cake, drank something as well on top of that, and then just headed off, running again. And it didn't feel like I'd eaten anything, or well, it did, but it didn't feel like. I mean, think about eating that and then going for a run. You wouldn't be in much of a state to run, but it just seemed to disappear. So
that'd be me on the sofa for 4 or 5 hours. That's an endurance event.
And funny enough, our last episode that we recorded with David, he talks about that, like training the gut to get used to that kind of food. And I mean, you can't prepare for 6 days of it really unless you start, like you say, progressing through those events like you have. But if you want to lose weight, guys, just go run every Wainwright that you can.
I should have weighed myself because
oh, you didn't. I was about to ask that. That's ruined my next question, Paul.
Surely you can't have the same title as what you claimed before. You must have lost a fair bit on these days, I imagine.
Well, I looked like I had anyway, definitely. Like, not necessarily at the finish. I mean, I was probably a bit swollen and puffy anyway, from not sleeping and stuff. But definitely in the next couple of days afterwards, you could just see my face was a bit drawn and, just looked a bit scrawny. But I'd be guessing at like maybe at most probably half a stone. I mean, I doubt I lost a massive amount, but it's pretty much back on now, I'd imagine. And like I say I'm 90 kgs all the time. I don't weigh myself, but I've been about 90 kgs since I was 19 years of age, and it just hasn't really changed. Like I used to play hurling. I don't know if you've heard of it in Ireland, and that was my sport from the time I was about 10 up until I was 24 or 5. So you just naturally, I guess it's a sort of an explosive sport where you're stop start, running fast and changing direction and all that stuff. So that'll create a certain type of body type, I guess. And then this is very, very different. So even though my weight hasn't changed, I suppose maybe my legs are a little bit different than they used to be. And I don't know, I'm not sure, but certain things will definitely have to change over the course of 10 years of this type of stuff. So
where did your running journey start then? You say you were in hurling originally, and we do know what hurling is. It's the most dangerous looking sport I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those sports, isn't it, where a couple of countries have got those things where you always say, oh, if I was from that country, I'd play that sport. I always say that about Australian football. I watch that on TV and go, that would be my sport if I was Australian. In reality, it would be only the same as my short rugby career, where I took one hit. It was literally my 18th birthday, took one hit and that was me done. And hurling is exactly the same. I imagine that I would have been a hurler.
Yeah.
Is that what you are?
Take Australian rules football and then arm everyone with clubs.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Well, so hurling and Gaelic football. So we have our own version of football as well, and it's very, very similar to Australian rules football. The main differences are the ball is round, it's not like a rugby ball, and there's no real defined tackle. And this is the biggest problem with Gaelic football, is in Aussie rules you can tackle kind of it's below the shoulders, I think, and above the hips, as far as I know. So you can grab someone and take them to the ground like in rugby, but just like between the hips and the shoulders, as far as I know. In football, you can shoulder charge someone, but you can't actually grab them and bring them to the ground, and that creates a problem because people don't get rid of the ball. Then they don't hand it off to the next person because there's no incentive to do so. Like if you hang on to the ball in Aussie rules, you get pulled to the ground, and the team get the ball off you. You know what I mean? So it gets the game flowing better in Aussie rules, whereas in Gaelic football they should bring that rule in my opinion. But anyway, we're going off topic. Hurling is the other Irish game. It's played on the same pitch, same amount of players, 15 players, and it's a cross between, I guess, hockey, lacrosse. And it's better than those sports in my opinion. It's faster. It's the type of things I like in sport, like a bit of aggression and a bit of contact are involved. So I would say if you play it, it's not as dangerous as if you have never played it and you're looking at it. Like it looks dangerous if you've never played, but it's a bit like rugby. Like if you're playing rugby, you probably know how to avoid certain things, whereas if you've never played it and you're looking at a guy getting stamped at the bottom of a rock, you kind of think, Jesus Christ, this is like, why would you play this game?
I'm going to become a fell runner instead.
Yeah.
You learn't how to suffer in hurling, and now you've been able to run all the Wainwrights.
It's quite. I guess hurling is the key to success is a team sport, and then obviously you've got into fell running, which is you can't really. I think the thing with ultra running in general that I personally like is you can't.
No one can run the miles for you.
That's it. So like you said, with the training and the miles that you put in, you wanted to know that you'd done everything so you could give it your best shot and know that you've done it. I suppose ultra running kind of exposes people that don't cover all bases, I suppose, especially when you're going for an event like this. But what was how long have you been running for? When was the transition out of hurling into
so in end of 2004, I went to Australia for a few months and just finished the hurling season, and went over there with a couple of friends and decided I at the time, Lance Armstrong was winning Tour de France, and I had friends who had used to row as well, so another endurance sport, and I always liked the idea of something individual like that, where there was this endurance element of sport, because I had never played anything or done anything that was endurance based. It was always team sports, and there was an attraction to it, and I'm not sure why. I just thought, it's cool to be able to train for hours and hours and hours and keep going for hours like that. I thought it was quite impressive, and Lance Armstrong's story at the time was inspirational as well, even though obviously it's been a bit coloured since then, but so that's what kind of made me think, well, I'm going to Australia. It's a country where triathlon was quite big at the time, or it has been big since triathlon became a thing, and I decided I would do a triathlon while I was over there. I liked the idea of this Ironman thing, at the time that was starting to get really big as well, and I just said, right, I'll try a triathlon while I'm over there. And there was nice sea cliffs to run along between Bondi Beach and Coogee, and I just decided I'd do a little bit of it while I was there, because I couldn't play hurling, so that's kind of where it came from. And then when I came back kind of middle of 2005, I just decided I would try and do a half Ironman triathlon at the end of that summer, and I was still playing hurling as well, and the two didn't really go very well together, and so did triathlon for a couple of years. I kind of got sick of it because I wasn't that keen a swimmer anyway, and the fact that you needed all this different kit and a bike, and you're getting punctures halfway through a 100-mile cycle, and you're having to hitchhike home if you run out of tubes, and all this stuff that just turned me off. And it was the complete opposite with running. You just need a pair of shoes and go for a run. And I wasn't that keen on. I was kind of keen on running at the time, but not massively, because I was still running on the road and didn't really I don't know. I'm sure I had heard of trail running by then, but it wasn't on my radar because I lived in Cork City at the time. There wasn't a whole pile of trails to run on, and it was only when a friend of mine, Robbie Williams, not the singer, a good friend of mine from Cork, he just said we'll go for a run down in a woods near the city, and we did, and it's like an hour and a half run that went by like it was 20 minutes. It was just the best experience ever, and that got me hooked, and I've just progressively gone on from there in the off-road running kind of thing.
It does sound like a better story if Robbie Williams got you into running.
Yeah.
Well done, Robbie Williams from Cork, for getting you into running.
No offence, Robbie Williams from Cork.
That turned out quite well. Well done, Robbie.
No,
that would have been a turn for them. Robbie Williams, the singer. Yeah.
We're crediting Robbie Williams with the Wainwright run, basically.
Yeah.
That would have been a turn for the books.
Well, we're going to have to come around to another aspect of the run. You are an Innovate athlete, an Innovate ambassador. What was the kit you were using, and how important actually was it in the end? Does it make a big difference?
Well, so in the Lake District, there's a fair amount of variety on the fells. So there's certain sections, like the Central Fells are really, really rocky. And then you come out around, say, like Eastern Fells over towards Kentmere and stuff, and there's plenty of boggy stuff and grass. And so you need a shoe that's fairly versatile and, a little bit of protection on the rocky stuff, and then lots and lots of grip on the boggy stuff. And I used their Cross Talon Ultra 260 is the full name, I think. So it's a really aggressive outsole with enough protection for me anyway. There was not too much cushioning, but enough for kind of longer events. And it's a wide fit as well, so it allows your foot to kind of splay and not be crushed in the shoe. And that was the shoe I used for most of the attempt. I cycled through a couple of different pairs of them, but that was the main shoe. And then they have the graphene shoe, the Terra Ultra 260 graphene shoe, which is for less aggressive terrain or less muddy terrain. I mean, but really good on rock, and really nice on say some of the road sections as well. Like it doubles up as it feels like a road shoe to me on the road. And there was a little bit of road there in the last couple of days, and it's a nice wide shoe as well, plenty of cushioning. So that really, really suited me, and they were the two main shoes. And then just the nice light breathable t-shirts that Innovate do. I can't remember the names of them, to be honest.
We'll put links in the description.
I needed some good waterproofs actually, because we got some bad weather, and they do a Protect shell, which is really, really good in bad weather, and I badly needed it. It's a heavier waterproof. It wouldn't be classed as a running waterproof. It's a little bit heavier than that, but in the really bad weather I used that, and that did really well. And then I had the lighter Storm shell then for most of the other time I was out in the fell, and that's a proper running jacket. It keeps you dry, but it's also really, really light, packs down really small, and that did really well. And like the kit was great. Like obviously, look, the best thing about it was I had plenty of stuff that I could keep changing out of, so I kept fresh, and I wasn't using the same shorts and t-shirt for 4 days straight. Like that's a recipe for a bad mood, if ever there was one. And like
so I kept any support runners as well, I suppose.
yeah, you don't want to turn people off, so I kept changing kit, and it's just nice, light, breathable stuff. Doesn't restrict your movement, and it was really, really comfortable to wear for such a long period of time. So lucky that I live here. Innovate's offices, their marketing department are based here, and I'm friendly with quite a few of them. And I do a class with them on a Monday. Every Monday at lunchtime, we do a class that you could kind of, I can't even describe it myself. It's like a mobility / strength and conditioning / team building type class. We have a bit of fun in it, and but because of that, I know them quite well as well. So it's nice to be involved with guys who I don't just like the stuff. I mean, I've always only worn Innovate shoes when I've been, from the time I started this type of stuff. But I know the guys well as well. Like they're it's more like friends than just some faceless company. They're a small company, and they're based in the heart of the Lake District, and it's a good fit, I think.
Yeah, and I think if they're testing the kit in that area, then what they're in the area, they test the kit out in the area, then you get to showcase it. And I definitely get that impression from them. Every time I see an Innovate athlete, they're all Innovate athletes seem to be quite close, as well as the guys looking after the team and stuff. And they seem there's a lot of teams out there, especially on the pro levels, that just haven't got that. So it's quite nice to see that that's happening, and it's good because you get the best out of your athletes as well. And you can see like Damien's helping Nikki, and Nikki's helping Damien, and it's great to see it, and it actually is. Yeah. It replicates the fell running.
Yeah, I'm actually I'm helping Nikki on her she's doing Tour de Géant in September, and I'll be out in the Alps, so I'll be pootling around after her to the different checkpoints and making sure she's all right. So it is like that. Yeah, it's a close knit thing.
And I suppose one of these things, you can have all of the preparation made in terms of your training, or as much as you can do for an event like this, but the Lake Districts themselves, even in summer, can be horrendous up on top of some of those hills. Is there an element of an attempt like this where you're also reliant on a weather window, do you think? We could probably ask how bad the weather was or how good the weather was across those 6 days, but could you foresee a time across those 6 days where it could have got to a point where weather would have stopped the attempt?
Yeah, so like one of the reasons that one of the issues I had with attempting it at all was that we couldn't legislate for the weather. Like if the weather was really, really bad for 7 days straight, then the attempt was probably fall flat on its face right from the off. So it was really, I had to, because I had too many people involved and there was so much organisation involved, I had to kind of pick a week and hope that the weather turned out good. So there was, on the whole, the weather was pretty okay, but we had a couple of, just bad, particularly the Sunday night was just really, really bad weather, and it was the type of weather where you just wouldn't, if you were going out for training and you'd just sack it off. Like it was, by the time it got to about 10 p.m, it was pretty much dark, and it was horizontal rain, like 40-mile-an-hour wind, and just, you were struggling to see 10 feet in front of you. And that went on from like the time I left Rydal, which is just near Ambleside on that leg, about 7 p.m, until I finished that leg at 1:30 in the morning or something, or 2 in the morning up on Kirkstone Pass, and it just was relentlessly shit weather for the entire time. And I went to bed, I got in the van and went to sleep for a couple of hours, and when I woke up it wasn't much better. And that there was a point there where I wasn't even halfway at that stage, and I was kind of thinking, Christ, like if this continues for much longer, I'm not, like, no matter how badly I want to keep going, it's going to wear me down. And in the end, like it improved. It started to steadily improve from about 9 or 10 a.m. that day, and we only had a few showers and a bit of wind and rain at times after that. But it was some good weather as well, and it, like, definitely, if you're doing a Bob Graham and the weather is forecast to be bad, there is potential to postpone it, or come back another time and try it again, or even just crack on and it's 24 hours, you might get through it. But with this, it was kind of a case of, if you don't do it now, you're never going to do it, because there's no way I was going to go and try and reorganize everything again. And even with other plans for the summer. Like Sarah is doing a lot of racing in the Alps, and we couldn't just put it off for 6 weeks and come back and do it again. And it would have been a total nightmare. So there was a bit of luck involved, for sure.
Well, it doesn't sound like there was that much luck involved. You still got stuck in the shit weather for a full night.
Yeah, but well, it stopped eventually. So I think if it had been like that for 4 or 5 days solid, then you just would have been beaten down and probably not able to keep going. But and as much for like the supporters as well, like it was every leg was, or sorry, a lot of the legs were quite long anyway. So you're having people support you from between 5 and 8 hours at a time out in the fell, and no one wants to go out in that crap, no matter how much they want to see you succeed or whatever. It's not fun, and it ceases to be fun when you're having to go at someone else's pace as well. So like whoever it was, they had to go at my pace, and for some, there was definitely times where that wasn't very fast, and like it might have been quite difficult to stay warm for people. And like it just, I wouldn't have been comfortable asking people to support in that kind of weather. I was just hoping that we were going to get decent conditions for the majority of the attempt, and in the end I think we did. So
well, one of the things that we might be able to try and do, because we actually, as well as obviously record the audio for the podcast, we actually do a screen record of our studio. So I do apologize for those watching on YouTube that have just seen me and Will, right? Because if we have a guest, in the studio, it sometimes can be a lot more it can help with visualization, especially like Dave Stash is so like motion with his hands when he's passionate and stuff. Like what we might be able to do is contact Innovate or anyone that's taking some videos, and if there is any bits of stock footage, we can kind of Will's looking at this because he knows he's got to edit it together.
Got to edit this.
But we might be able to add some stuff in there, obviously with your permission as well, Paul, just to give people an actual visual of what the weather could be like and what it was. And even if it's not your attempt, we can definitely, I guarantee we can find some footage of the Lake District when it's at its finest. So we might be able to show people that are not from the UK what the lakes looks like and how beautiful it can be and how shitty it can be at the same time.
Well, yes, thanks, Chris. I'm sure your audio-visual department can come up with something.
It'll be a bit late for your podcast, but Dave McFarlane, who's a filmmaker up here, he's making a film, and hopefully it'll be in the Kendall Mountain Film Festival in November, and maybe some other film festivals as well. So,
well, there you go. You've just dropped it in the podcast.
Yeah. Maybe we can rub shoulders with him and get a couple of 10-second clips. That's
maybe. But there's some really good footage there. I just saw a couple of snippets. Like there was lots of drone stuff and lots of GoPro stuff. Some of the pacer runners were doing some of that stuff, and it looks. He has said it's probably going to be quite good. He basically said, with all the stuff he's got, it'd be very hard for him to fuck it up, basically. But
okay, well, pressure on.
Yeah.
That's not something I ever say before. That's just asking for trouble. Okay. Well, I guess we're getting towards the end here, but there were a couple of questions I wanted to cover with you first. What do you think? There must be, because we've talked a lot about the suffering and the horrible climbs and the terrible weather. What stands out? What were the good bits? You had 6 days out there. There must have been some great moments too.
Yeah, so I had a really there was lots of really positive moments and standout moments from every day. I could probably pick something out, but certainly like through those central fells on the Saturday, with guys who I really get on well with, supporting me, and getting to the Killyraddy hut in Wasdale. That's a local climbing club. They have a hut down in Wasdale, and Joss Naylor being there, and Dave Macon from a Killyraddy club who I get on really well with, and he was there. He he had made scrambled egg, and he'd put some black pudding, scrambled it through it, and he was, that was like tasted like the best thing ever when you were like 2 days in and kind of tired and whatever, and small things like that made a big difference. And then getting to Ambleside or Rydal on the Sunday evening, and because I run with Ambleside, there was lots and lots of people there who I know, and that was a really, really nice moment. And then my own club, Ambleside AC, they have their club run on a Tuesday evening, and they had arranged to try and intercept me on one of the hills on that Tuesday evening, and there was like 30 of them coming up this hill against me as I was coming down, and I had forgotten that one of the lads had told me they were going to do that, and I'd totally forgotten about it. It was 5 days in, and I was not thinking straight, and so when I saw them, that was a massive lift. And obviously the finish was a really, really big high as well, because I was definitely ready to stop at that stage, and there was lots of people there, and Joss Naylor was there. My parents had come over from Ireland kind of out of the blue. I didn't know they were coming. They met me on I think it was on the Tuesday as well. They'd come over that day, and they were there for a few days, so they got to see the finish. And having my girlfriend there, and just that was very special moment as well. And it's like I said to you guys earlier, like that, I can't see myself surpassing that feeling from any other race or challenge that I do. I think it all just worked out perfectly. And the fact that we raised quite a bit of money for the charity Mind as well, in memory of Chris Sterling, who's a friend of mine who ran with Ambleside and was a really well-known triathlete. He passed away in April, and the fact that it was done in his memory as well, that just gave it another, I suppose, special meaning, because it's nice to know that, like, it's about the only thing I could do to pay tribute to him. And when in 10 years' time, hopefully his name will still be associated with this attempt. And so that was special as well.
Well, you've managed to raise over 30,000 for Mind. I saw that on your Just Giving page this morning, and we'll drop a link to that in the description in this podcast as well. So if anyone else wants to contribute, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, what a massive tribute to your friend there.
I think as the legacy of that is incredible, and what a great way to continue his name. But I think as well, like, if you have ever been that person to chuck a $5 in for someone doing a marathon or a 10k and stuff, and they're all worthwhile. Everyone's got their own battles and mountains, whether it be, they've trained up for months to do a 5k, 10k, but and we're telling you as an endurance fanboy, this is the Mac Daddy of runs. If you're going to buy someone a pint, Paul deserves it, and you can chuck a few quid on his Just Giving page, and you'll make a big difference to someone's life. So, that's amazing. I think we've got to finish there, because that literally sums up this whole thing for me. I think that there are many more questions, by the way, Paul, that we want to go in at you. I think that it would be great to get you back in. I don't know if you've got anything else planned. I guess there's a lot of rest and ice cream for the next couple of weeks.
I'm quite keen to get back doing something sooner rather than later. Like I definitely will try and race while I'm in the Alps over the summer, and nothing very long, but the natural thing to do is to kind of think, well, what else could I do? And I do want to go back to Tour de Gent as well, and there's lots of other races I'd love to do. So I'll definitely be
busy.
I'm not retiring or anything like that. So,
well, double Wainwrights is a
no, fuck that.
Yeah, I mean, someone had to say it out loud. Someone else. There's going to be listeners thinking that. We believe in you, Paul. Paul, thanks for coming on, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure to hear the story. We're going to have, in the bios, we're going to have loads of reading that you can read up on this. There's the Innovate articles and stuff that provide more information or any gaps that we've missed out. I think hearing the story from the man himself is going to definitely add that extra narrative when you read those blogs. Now, you can find the Just Giving page. You can find Paul across social and things like that as well through the Innovate blogs. And Paul, hopefully we can get you back on the podcast at a later date to maybe give some tips to some up and coming fell runners and people that want to start maybe attempting some of the many challenges that the Lake Districts holds.
Yeah, brilliant.
Okay, Paul. Well, we will speak to you sometime soon. Thanks for coming on. And as well as that, if you've got any questions for Paul, as always, you can fire them into the comments section below, and we'll see if we can get any answers from the team, especially if it comes to the kit Paul was wearing. I'm sure the Innovate team will gladly will answer any of your questions. Of course, as usual, you can find us on Spotify and iTunes. You can leave reviews, and you can subscribe to make sure you're the first to see it. If you're on YouTube, you can subscribe there and watch the action.
And frankly, by now, you should already be following us on Facebook and Instagram. So we're not going to say it again. But it's there.
Yeah, we'll probably remind you every episode. We've got more guests like Paul. Next up, actually, is an episode with Adam Kimball. Indeed. Adam Kimball is next, our favourite American. And he's going to be talking about his new role with us at BTU, and he's going to be talking about his course record at the Desert Ultra, and probably his attempt to go for a fastest known time that currently Kilian Jornet has. So that tells you how quick that boy is. Paul, once again, mate, thanks for coming on, and we'll speak to you soon.